Hey everybody, you're listening to Sit Down with Stand-Ups. I'm Ari Azizian, and I'm extremely honored to introduce my guest today. He's one of the all-time greatest stand-up comedians. He was a part of the first black and white comedy duo in American history. He's appeared on The Tonight Show 61 times, and he toured and opened for Frank Sinatra for over a decade. I'm sitting here with the great Mr. Tom Dreesen.
Well, I don't know about great.
Well, hilarious, fantastic, wonderful.
It's okay, you know, Ari, when you introduce a comedian like this, that's great. They love it. But if you're going on stage, you say, don't say all those things. I mean, because you know how that is. You say, hey, fasten your seatbelt. This next guy's going to knock you dead. Well, you know, that's a kiss of death. Right there, you know. But it's okay here, yeah.
Well, it's such an honor to talk to you today. And
Thank you.
I've seen you at the Laugh Factory a couple times, and I think you're hilarious. You always, like, get me in stitches, and I think you're one of the best.
Oh, that's kind of. I use the Laugh Factory to break in new material. You know, whenever I come off the road, you know, if I'm going to do Letterman or something like that, I use the Laugh Factory to, and that I haven't through the years. I was one of those lucky guys who didn't have to go into the comedy clubs. In fact, when Tim Reid and I started as America's first black and white comedy team, there were no comedy clubs.
Right.
So, you know, later when I started doing the Tonight Show, when a team split up and I started doing the Johnny Carson show, and I went from there straight to Las Vegas.
Wow.
So I didn't have to play that comedy club circuit. However, I go to those clubs every chance I get when I'm on the road or somewhere. I'll go and break in new material if I'm in New York or and here in L.A., you know, where I live. The Laugh Factory is a great spot to try out new material, you know.
It's so cool to watch. And just to go back a little bit, I heard you grew up in Chicago, and you originally, as a boy, you were shining shoes in bars, in local bars. And I believe you said you saw your father making jokes and making people laugh.
Well, what's interesting, he was my mom was a bartender.
Yeah.
and so we had 8 kids. We lived in a shack. 5 of us slept in one bed.
Wow.
We had no bathtub, no shower, no hot water. You know, it was raggedy poor in a rat-infested, roach-infested shack. So as a little boy, and by the way, I regret none of that. You know, I think that's the greatest thing that ever happened to me, you know, because all of life is about perception. It taught me a great work ethic that I needed to survive later in life as a stand-up comedian. So I would, you know, my older brother and I'd shine shoes in taverns, set pins in bowling alleys, caddy in the summertime,
wow.
Carry 2 bags, sell newspapers. But one of the jobs, one of my first jobs, was shining shoes. And my mom was a bartender, so I would go from bar to bar in my neighborhood. There were 36 taverns where I grew up at. 8 right in my local neighborhood. You know, there were a lot of steel mills and factories, and all these guys would come out of the factory and have a shot in a beer before they went home. And you know, so I would change
blue collar.
Yeah, real
neighborhood.
blue collar, yeah. So I would change shoes in all the taverns. But the last tavern I'd go to was where my mom tended bar. For her brother-in-law owned a tavern. It was my uncle by my mom's marriage, you know, and but it was my mom's sister's husband, you know. And so as I'd go there last and wait for the shifts to change. But while I would sit there in a corner, my mom would bring me a little Pepsi-Cola or something. I'd sit there in the corner, wait for the shifts to change. He would be behind the bar telling jokes.
Yeah.
And just cracking everybody up. And I was fascinated as a little boy that somebody could...
How old were you at that?
8 years old.
8 years old.
That this man, with his vocabulary, his vernacular, and his inflection, could cause this sound to come out of everybody's body and fill the air like electricity and unify all these people. All of a sudden, they were all one. It was just fascinating to me. Wasn't so much even the content, but the way that he would deliver a punchline, you know, and get all these people laughing, you know. And so I emulated him later, you know. I told a lot of those jokes, many that should not be told on a Catholic school playground, you know. But it was years later that I found out that he was my biological father.
Oh, wow.
It was an interesting tale, but my mom had an affair with her brother-in-law.
Wow.
And nobody knew
and
that.
You didn't know, yeah.
No, I didn't know that. No one knew that. My father didn't know that. My dad didn't know that. No one knew it. And through the years, I was attracted to this guy, though. He was my favorite uncle, and we looked alike.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah. And so but I also loved him a lot. I mean, he was my hero as a little boy growing up because he was a tough guy, tough Italian guy from the south side of Chicago, you know. And years later, I confronted him when I felt this, you know, because I didn't look like any of my brothers and sisters. I had 8 brothers and sisters, you know. My one buddy described the family picture. He said, it looks like a whole group of Cocker Spaniels and one Airedale. as me. But anyhow, so it turned out to be, and none of these things I regret, of course. I don't regret any of these things. So it turned out to me, it was interesting that how years later that became my profession, because it was the sound of laughter always was my first love.
And that's so interesting that you get your your sense of humor from your family. And was your mom and brothers and sisters very funny as well? And
my mom had a great laugh.
Yeah.
But my brothers and sisters weren't all funny. My one sister, she's kind of a character. But my mom had a great laugh, and I liked to hear her laugh. I would make her laugh. I can remember when I was a little boy, she had pneumonia real bad. Later we found out it was double pneumonia, and they had to take her to the hospital. But where I lived in the shack, we never went to doctors. You just didn't do that. You home remedies yourself.
Right.
That we all survived that childhood is amazing to me, because there was no heat in the wintertime, and if a window broke, you stuck a rag in it. And
Exactly.
that's just
No, my
the way
father was from a family of 8 as well, and
so
he said doctor. He said doctor. What are you talking about? It's just a cold.
That's the truth. We never went. The first time I had a complete physical was when I went in the service at age 17.
Yeah.
However, so
her laugh was
so my mom was very ill, and I one time dressed up like Bing Crosby and then Bob Hope. I would come in the room. My sisters would introduce me as Bing Crosby, and then I would come. I had a long coat, and I'd put on one of my dad's old hats, and I'd come in and I'd sing to her. She would just crack up as sick as she was. Then I'd come in and I'd be Bob Hope, and I'd do a joke or something, and they'd introduce me as Bob Hope. So it's hearing her laugh, and she had a great laugh. I really enjoyed that, and I think a home that if you're raised in a home that has laughter in it, it encourages you, and a sense of humor. And a sense of humor is not when you have the ability to laugh at others' shortcomings or misfortunes. It's when you have the ability to laugh at your own. If you can make fun of you, if you want to teach your children a sense of humor, share every faux pas you've ever done. Come home and tell them, I remember one time telling my kids my lip was bleeding. They said, what happened? And it happened. I went to open a car door, and I hit myself right in the mouth with the car door. Now, your instinct is to go and say, somebody threw a rock at me.
Got in
or
a fight.
tell them how dumb you are.
Yeah.
But they loved the fact that I would say that I did something stupid. So a good sense of humor is when you have the ability to laugh at yourself and laugh at your own shortcomings.
Absolutely, yeah. That honesty, I think, is
that gift,
the funniest. So you're 8 years old. You're introduced to this, that you're hearing all this laughter. I mean, comedy even today is not a practical industry to go into, I feel like, and there weren't any comedy clubs like you mentioned. So was it around then when you discovered that you wanted to be a comedian or go into show business?
Never. I would have never dreamed, Ari, that I'd ever be in show business. It was the furthest thing from my mind. I went in the service at age 17, I was a high school dropout. I got a high school diploma from the Navy, and I went to junior college nights and studied political science, Came out of the service after 4 years, wandered aimlessly. I worked construction. I wheeled concrete, pouring sidewalks in basements. I worked on a loading dock. I was a truck driver for a while. Then I worked on a loading dock and became a Teamster union guy, and I was loading trucks. And then the management came to me and convinced me to drop my union card and become management, and I became a foreman on a loading dock. With big, tough Polish, Irish, Italian guys from Chicago, real tough guys. And I was for 8 months, I was working with them side by side, and then I became their boss. That was really, that was a great experience.
That's so interesting. I think Mr. Sinatra was also, wasn't he down in a foreman for like getting off stuff from like a ship, like cargo?
Well, he as a little boy, he lived in Hoboken,
right?
So that's what that town was made of those hardworking kind of guys, And his mom and dad actually had a tavern called Marty O'Brien's Bar and Grill. His father boxed under the name of Marty O'Brien because Italians, there was so much prejudice against Italians. People don't realize that in America. There were more Italian lynchings than any other ethnicity. They lynched 11 Italians in one community. They burned out villages where Italians lived. There was really a lot of prejudice against Italians. Yeah, no one knows that because it was never passed on down to us. They assimilated and moved on. More Italian Americans fought in World War II than any other ethnicity. The first Medal of Honor winner was a guy named Bastiglione from New Jersey.
Wow.
I'm only saying all this because that was the kind of stuff that that Frank's father would talk about. That he had to box under an Irish name because Italians, there was so much prejudice. So he had picked up a little bit of popularity in Hoboken as a fighter, and so when he retired from fighting, his name was Marty O'Brien. They opened up a bar called Marty O'Brien's Bar and Grill, and so he had a local celebrity, And there was an old Nickelodeon in there, and Frank used to sing. The sailors would put a nickel in this piano
And have him
that
sing
had a
over
roll.
it.
And Frank would sing. They'd give him a nickel to sing. You know?
Oh, wow.
So he used to tell me those stories, you know. But
you're a foreman on a
yeah,
construction
we're forming
site.
unloading down.
I'm sorry about that.
I'm glad you stay with me because
Yeah.
I go all over the place. But so I wandered aimlessly. I tended bar. I did all these things, and I was so unhappy with where I was in life. I mean, I was married at the time. I had 3 kids, and I kept thinking I'd sit in bars late at night with my buddies, on weekends, and I kept thinking I don't belong here, but I didn't know where I belonged. I used to pray. I would say, God, this can't be what you want me to do. I just felt so unfulfilled. I joined a civic group called the JCs, in those days called the Junior Chamber of Commerce. They trained young men in leadership and how to sit on a committee, how to serve on a committee, how to chair that committee, and how to become leaders in the community. That whatever problems were facing the community, we went out and attacked those problems, formed groups and served on those committees and made the community a better place to live. That's what JCs were about. By making the community a better place to live, we made the state a better place to live, and then the nation a better place to live. That was their goal. And they were nationwide. So I joined that group. And in it, they were attacking community problems. And one of the problems in the community, we had serious race relation problems back in that day. And we would do community attitude surveys, and it was a real difficult time in America.
This is like mid-'60s.
Yeah. Mid-'60s and the late '60s. And so one of the problems was, as it is today, was our youth destroying their minds and bodies with drugs. And they were starting at such an early age. I decided I was going to write a drug education program teaching grade school children the ills of drug abuse with humor. So I put this whole program together, and I got a guy named John DeBoer to help me. He said, I'll help you, Tom, white guy in my neighbor, in the JCs. And the night I proposed this project as a JC project, a new member joined, a black guy named Tim Reid. He graduated from Norfolk State College, and E.I. DuPont recruited him into Chicago as a marketing rep. And he said to me, after I proposed the project, he said, I'd like to work with you on that. I'm a new guy. I said, gee, thanks, but I got a guy. But to show you how fate is, Ari, that all those prayers I was saying, God, what am I supposed to be doing in life?
You guys paths crossed at that moment.
Yeah, and so the next day, John DeBoer calls me and said, I got a new job, Tom. I can't do that project with you. I said, oh, yeah, what was that guy's name, that black guy? Oh, Tim Reid. Now I called him, and now we go into the schools. He worked with me on the project. We got it all together. We go into the schools, and the moment I walked in that classroom, I realized, wow, our schools were all integrated. So they see a young black guy and a young white guy, walk in the room. We got their attention immediately, and so we played music and got the kids laughing, and we played off of one another. And once we got them settled down, we started planting the seeds of the ills of drug abuse. And one day, a little 8th grade girl, the program became #1 in 50 states and in 22 foreign countries. They used our JC, our approach to drug education at an elementary school level. Mind you, in those days, they weren't teaching drug education at a college or a high school level, let alone at an elementary school level. So we one day, a little 8th grade girl said, you guys are funny. You ought to become a comedy team. And the thought of a black-white comedy team intrigued us. No one had ever done that before. So we went out and we started doing what we wrote material. We worked all black clubs in the North and the South and all white clubs. Black clubs, what they affectionately call the Chitlin Circuit, black-owned, black-operated nightclubs. And we struggled for 6 years. Guy put a lit cigarette out in Tim's face the 4th time we're on stage.
Wow.
A guy hit me in the face with an ice ball at the University of Illinois. Another guy attacked me one night. And I mean, it was a funny thing about racism. If there was a black guy who hated white people, who hated them with a passion, he wasn't mad at me. He was mad at Tim for being with me. See, Tim would be an Uncle Tom. If there was a white guy, a redneck, who hated black people with a passion, he wasn't mad at Tim. He's mad at me. I'm the N-word lover, and he didn't mind calling me that, 2 or 3 of them catching me in the men's room.
My gosh.
And I boxed when I was in the service so I could handle myself, but sometimes there was one time a guy outweighed me by 150 pounds and pummeled me, But most people liked what we did. And we stuck it out for 6 years. The team split up, and as you know, Tim went on to become Venus Flytrap on WKRP Cincinnati on a show called Sister Sister.
He's a director.
Yeah, he's a director. And we wrote a book, Tim and Tom, an American comedy in black and white.
It's such a great book. I really love this book. It's so inspiring, and it's so truthful and honest, too.
Painfully honest.
Yeah, no, you read like these comedy memoirs, and they're all great, but they say, well, I was in high school, and then I listened to my first comedy album, and then I was on The Tonight Show. It's like, you just skipped everything. Yeah. But this one, it goes in so much great detail.
Our childhoods.
Your childhoods, and You know, you mentioned the Chitlin Circuit, and I'm such a lover of music, and you read about those like James Brown, Smokey Robinson, Marvin Gaye, all those guys.
Yeah.
And you guys toured with them. You were with
yeah.
Gladys Knight and the Pips, Smokey,
Yeah.
Temptations.
Smokey's one of my dearest friends to this day. Yeah.
That's amazing. You guys were like rock stars, you and Tim. Like,
Well, I don't know that not at all. We were really just struggling, and we were on the verge of something, and I dreamed that Tim Reid and I would become the greatest comedy team in America, whatever. But I really felt we could be. But as you read the book, there's a game that people play. Not everybody, but it's called divide and conquer. If they see you and I getting along real good, most people say, hey, Tom and I are good friends, But somebody will be jealous of that friendship and say, Ari, I don't know if you know about Tom, but, Tom says this when you're not around. Or something.
Yeah.
Just some people have that gene in their brain.
Right. To
divide it.
things.
Yeah, they see something working and they want to divide it. So consequently, that happened with Tim and I, and it's in the book. But, now the book is going to become a movie.
Oh, yeah. I heard about that.
Yeah, so
Is Tim directing it?
No, or I don't think so. What they have in mind, a company called Lone Trees Production is going to be producing it. So I'm not sure who's going to direct it, to be honest with you.
Well, I'm really excited to see that on film.
It's going to be fun to do.
Yeah.
I mean, Tim and I are going to be consultants. We can't play ourselves. That was 45 years ago,
Right. I wanted to ask you mentioned a little bit about it, but in those early days, going out in front of, I imagine, were they theaters? Because comedy clubs weren't really, like 200. You guys were playing large audiences. What was it like?
No, we were playing not always larger. We played Chitlin Circuit. We had 12 people in the audience.
Oh, okay.
The Chitlin Circuit were black-owned, black-operated clubs like the Sugar Shack in Boston, the 20 Grand in Detroit, the High Chaparral in Chicago, the Burning Spear, Dating Club Lounge, the Club Harlem in Atlantic City.
Oh, right, yeah.
The 20 Grand in Detroit, all the Motown acts. Motown was at that time in Detroit. Berry Gordy's company there. So the Motown acts broke in their act before they went to Vegas. They broke them in at the 20 Grand. And that's where we got to work with all these great artists,
Yeah, those stories are amazing to read in the book.
But but I've worked, with Sinatra. I worked 20,000 seaters. One time in Hawaii, 40,000 people outdoors.
Gosh. That's incredible. No, and I was wondering, what were, this is like the height of the civil rights movement. It's the late 60s, early 70s, and what is the audience's perception when they see a white and black man come out and do comedy?
We got their attention immediately.
Yeah.
And we'd walk out on stage, and sometimes you'd hear people, rah, 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 and I said, and all of a sudden you hear, a hush.
Just quiet.
And they say, what is this all about? And then Tim and I would play off of that.
Mm-hmm.
We'd have such fun playing off of that. We had so many great routines that one of them was where he taught me how to be a black guy. And if we worked an all black audience, he'd.
Is the bus stop routine?
Yeah, that was one of those routines.
I love
Yeah,
that one.
and then we also did a routine on the dating game. Where I play, we do it. Welcome to the dating game, and we'd make it apply to whatever area we were in, and we'd get local knowledge about certain neighborhoods and characters, and we would implement all that into the bit. And we worked prisons. We did 11 prisons in 1 year.
Wow.
And so we would bring the dating game to Joliet Prison or Pontiac Prison, and I would get the warden's name, and bachelor number one was like a white guy. Tim would play all three bachelors, and I'd play the girl. I'd put a wig on, and first I'd be the announcer, and then we'd switch back and forth. But Tim, bachelor number one, would be like this white hillbilly yokel, redneck. Bachelor number two was a tough ass brother from the south side of Chicago, and bachelor number three was a gay guy that worked in the laundry. So we would do these different. And bachelor number three was not interested at all in the girl. He was interested in bachelor number two, and so there was this conflict was always going on. And we just had so much fun with that bit,
Yeah, it's so funny, and then from then on, did you move to Los Angeles in the '70s, like mid '70s, to pursue stand up?
Yeah, when the team broke up.
By yourself, right?
Yeah, the team broke up. It devastated me. I never wanted that team to break up. As I said earlier, I thought Tim and Tom. My dream was that they would be the greatest comedy team America had ever known. I wanted that as a goal. I wanted.
How do you overcome something like that where you're so used to working with a partner and now you have to go on stage by yourself?
That was the problem I was having. I had never been on stage by myself, just with Tim from day one, nor Tim by himself, just with me. And when the team broke up and I realized it was over, I was sitting in a bar with my buddies back in the neighborhood. It was like 2:00 in the morning. And I was sitting at the bar thinking, what am I going to do? I could either get another black guy and do the same act, or I could go it alone, or I could quit the whole dream and please my ex-wife. She never wanted me in show business. I could get a job working in a factory or something like that. She just didn't like show business she wanted, and I don't blame her. Her dad worked in a factory 35 years and never missed a day at work.
Well, it's amazing many comedians start out, by themselves living on their own, but you had already had a family.
Yeah.
And you just had begun doing stand-up.
The day I went on stage, I had a wife and 3 kids.
My God.
So, I got married very young when I was in the service. But anyhow, the point of that is that I was sitting in this bar, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I just sat at the bar, and I said, I'm going to go it alone. I'm gonna try to get on the Tonight Show. I said, I've read literally hundreds of books on the powers of the mind. I give motivation speeches even to this day on 4 subjects: on perception, visualization, self-talk, and develop a sense of humor. And but anyhow, sitting at the bar, I said to myself, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go it alone. I made up my mind. I'm going to try to get on the Tonight Show. And then I remembered something that I read in a book by W. Clement Stone called Positive Mental Attitude. It said, if you know what you want in life, search your life. If it's a noble endeavor, search your life and see if there's anything in your life that can deter you from that noble achievement, and then get it out of your life, man, woman, or beast. And I thought, what could stop me if I wanted to make it as a stand-up comedian? And it was the beer in front of me. I said, I love drinking. I love hanging out with the guys and drinking 10, 15, 20 beers on a Friday night or a Saturday night. I said, that probably could stop me. And I pushed the beers across the bar, and I told my friend I quit. And my friend was tending bar. His name was Jimmy Lepore. He said, you're through for the night, Tom. I said, no, I quit. He said, you quit. He said, for the night you quit. I said, I quit. He went, yeah, right. And I never touched another drop till after I was doing the Tonight shows and successful. But now, even now, I haven't had a drink in the, it doesn't interest me anymore. I wasn't on the program. I didn't do anything like that, go to AA. Mm-hmm. But it's how dedicated you have to be. If you want to be a stand-up comedian, you really want to be a stand-up comedian. I don't mean, well, I'd like to be one, and, if things go my way, I would be one. No, I'm talking about a burning desire that doesn't leave your conscious mind ever. You want to be a stand-up comedian. You want to make a living as a stand-up comedian. Then you have to have bulldog tenacity, and you have to approach it like if you're running a marathon, because it isn't a 5K. It's a lifetime,
Right.
And that's what I knew I had to dedicate myself to it,
That's incredible, yeah. I've heard, like Jay Leno and stuff say there's 3 things that can ruin a comedian. It's women, alcohol, and drugs. And he says you gotta...
No question.
Yeah. But his is cars, I think. He just keeps
yeah, but he didn't have cars, so he made a whole lot of money.
Right, exactly. Well, I mean, so you come out to L.A.
Let me stop just for a second. That's that question. There's 2 great days in a human being's life, Ari. The day you're born and the day you find out why. Those are the 2 greatest days of your life.
That's so true.
And when I knew, the first time I went on stage with Tim and something got a laugh that I had written, that was like, I can't describe that even to this day. It was like one of those old B movies where the dark clouds open up and the sun bursts through. And I was on stage and I was saying to myself, yes, oh, yes, this is what I want to do. I knew that moment. This is what I was put on this planet to do. I didn't think about becoming a star or having 300 cars like Jay or anything. All I thought that the thought that you could make a living making people laugh overwhelmed me. To this day, I mean, there isn't a day go by that I don't thank God that I make a living making people laugh.
Yeah.
Because I wheeled concrete, I cleaned sewers, I loaded trucks. I mean, I know what hard work is all about. This is the greatest profession on the planet.
Absolutely.
End of story. You said
no, absolutely. Because if you're loading trucks and doing all that, at the end of the week, you want to go see somebody make you laugh. So now you're that guy. That's amazing.
And we make a living at doing it. It's the greatest profession on the planet. When I give motivation speeches to comedians, I give motivation speeches, as I said earlier, to everybody. But I have a specific program I do for comedians. It's called The Joy of Stand-Up Comedy and How to Get There. And I teach them how, in my presentation, what a great profession we have. And not to tarnish it, I've known 5 great stand-up comedians who committed suicide. I mean, they were great stand-up comedians. I'm not talking about they couldn't make it or something. They were very good at what they did. But what I try to teach my fellow comedians is to enjoy this journey that we're on. We were in the greatest profession in the world, and so one night you're making 20,000 people laugh, and you're making millions, and maybe years later you're making 20 people laugh, and you're making a few bucks. It doesn't matter. You didn't step down. It's just that's time moves on, but you still have the skills to make people laugh.
True, yeah.
So, and your question was, you said, and then you moved out to L.A. and.
Well, you moved out here in the mid-'70s, and you're working with great comedians like David Letterman, Jay Leno, Robin Williams, and, I mean, you've been around so many great comedians, and I was just wondering, have you discovered anything that all comedians sort of share that they have in common, maybe?
Well, that's a good point. I would go on stage every night at the Comedy Store with all these unknown comedians. David Letterman, Jay Leno, Gallagher, Robin Williams, Michael Keaton, who else? They're all unknowns. Elaine Boozler.
Wow.
The girl waiting tables was Deborah Winger. But the one thing that in my opinion, and this will sound negative, but it's an observation. The 45 years I've been in show business, my opinion, 85% of all stand-up comedians are insecure, neurotic, sometimes psychotic, loved, starved wrecks. Absolute wrecks. And the other 15% are gifted, confident people who say, I know how to write a joke and I know how to tell one. But that insecurity also makes them funny. It's also what makes them funny is their cynical look on the world. And if you're a cynic, somebody once said to me, I'd like to write for you. What do you want me to write about? I said, what pisses you off? That's what you write about.
Right.
Anyhow, so that's the one thing. But I'll tell you something interesting that you brought this up, and I hadn't thought about this in a long time. Years ago, a magazine asked me to do a story about what all stand-up comedians might have in common. One thing. And I came across this thing. I just, for the heck of it, I said to every stand-up comedian I met, and I asked all kinds of them, big names and little guys, did your father love you? Did your father say, I love you? Did he put his arms around you and hug you and say, I love you? And I couldn't find one.
Wow.
I couldn't find one. Now,
Yeah.
I had a couple guys say, oh, my dad loved me. I said, a lot of them said I didn't have a dad. I didn't know who my dad was. A lot of them said, no, my dad wasn't that kind of guy. He was, but one guy said, actually, a couple of them said, my dad loved me. I said, did he tell you that? Well, no, he didn't have to tell me, but I knew he loved me. I said, no, did he ever put his arms around you and say, I love you, and I'm proud of you, son? And he said, well, no. So my thought is that maybe that might, but of course you might interview 1,000 bartenders and they'll tell you the same thing. I don't know.
Right, yeah.
Truck drivers. But I think that maybe sometimes that's a love, that laughter becomes love of a sort. And it's addicting.
It's an approval.
It's approval, yeah,
right.
and that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether that's any stand-up comedian listening to this will probably call in and say, "My dad hugged me every day of my life." But
No,
for the most part,
there's a lot of truth in that.
I found that I don't know whether that is, but I just thought I'd try to find something that we all had in common.
No, it's amazing. Yeah, no, I still try so hard to make my dad laugh every day. It's a huge challenge for me. But so you're at the Comedy Store, and how long was it before you got your first appearance on the Tonight Show?
About a year after the team broke up. I went to
That's
the Comedy Store every
very
night. Yeah, I really, but I hounded the Tonight Show. I wrote funny letters to Craig Tennis, the talent coordinator, and anyhow, but yeah, I got that first break. And that's, by the way, the reason you came here in those days. In 1972, Johnny Carson was in New York. He left New York and came to L.A. Right. Consequently, all the comedians migrated out here. When I came out here in 75, it was with David Letterman, Jay Leno, Robin Williams. Everybody was coming this way because that's where Johnny Carson was.
Right.
And for the reason being, there were other shows, Merv Griffin, Mike Douglas, Dinah Shore. One appearance on The Tonight Show, your whole life changed. Freddie Prinze did one appearance on The Tonight Show. The very next day, he got a sitcom.
Yeah.
Next day. I did one appearance on The Tonight Show. The next day, CBS signed me to a development deal. I was broke, drawing unemployment. The next day, I got a development deal from CBS where the guy handed me a check for $10,000. And those days, that was $10 million, to me. And my rent was $225 a month with a wife and 3 kids, so you can imagine. And I got $1,850 a month for 1 year while they held me to this development deal. So all of a sudden, all my bills were paid, the rent was paid, the groceries were paid, and I could now focus on stand-up,
Yeah.
So that's how powerful that show was, and that's why we came here, to get on the Johnny Carson show. It's the Tonight Show, but we called it the Johnny Carson show.
Yeah. No, it's such an amazing story. I read in your book, and you mentioned you came up to the Comedy Store, and it was like a Tuesday night, and you saw a line wrapped around the Comedy Store. It was like 400 people out on the street. And you said, what's the big deal? I said, well, there's this new guy everybody's here to see. And all the talent coordinators here. His name is Billy Crystal.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, whatever. And then you go on stage, and there's only 20 people in the audience. But you still gave it your all, which I love. And
well, the reason for that
was in the
was,
audience, and
the reason for that was
show.
Rollins and Jaffe were his management. Rollins and Jaffe, big management firm, and the Tonight Show was looking at 3 comedians that night: Baum and Eston, a comedy team. Baum later became Bruce Baby Baum, and Larry Eston later wrote for Cheers and shows like that. But they were looking at Baum and Eston. They were looking at me, and they're looking at this new guy, Billy Crystal. And when I pulled up in front of the Comedy Store, I'm worried because it's a Tuesday night. You're thinking, well, there'll probably be 15, 20 people in the audience. And, you know, we comedians, we like a big crowd.
Right.
We got a better chance of scoring. And I see this huge crowd, and I went, oh, my God, that's great. And then I look, and it's Carl Reiner. And I look, and it's, oh, my God, it's Bud Yorkin, and it's all these powerful guys who did, Norman Lear, and I'm going, oh my God, they're all going to see me tonight. And I realized Rollins and Jaffe corralled them to see their client, Billy Crystal, and they kept them outside till I was done. And I don't blame them. That's a good management move. They didn't bring all those people in there to see me, So when I went on, there was like 18, 20 people in the audience, and luckily I had a good set. Craig Tennis said. Afterward, he said, I enjoyed your material. I want you to come to my office Monday, and we'll talk. I went there Monday, and he said, okay, behind his desk. He said, I saw you do 20 minutes. What 5 would you do if I gave you the Tonight Show? I said, well, I'd do this bit. And he said, nah, take that one out. Now do it again. And he said, that's good. No, take that one out. And finally he said, that's a good set. He said, you're on next Tuesday. Oh, my God.
That's amazing, yeah.
I couldn't sleep for a week, and called everybody in the world, and then I got bumped. I got there, and I got in makeup and got in my dressing room, and they said we ran out of time. And then I went the next week and got in makeup, and we ran out of time. It happened 3 times in a row to me. And on the 4th time I go to do the Tonight Show, I'm in makeup, and it's my 4th time there, and I'm in the makeup room, and Fred DeCordova, the producer, came in, and he said, I got bad news for you. I said, what? He said, you're going on tonight. The pressure. You get a lump in your throat the size of a grapefruit. They come to get you after. Bert Convy was on the show with Carol Burnett, and she'd had everybody laughing, and then he was going to sing a song, and after his song I was going on. Bert Convy sang a song, Now They Come to Get You, and you take that long walk backstage of the Tonight Show, and all the stagehands in those days, today, you're a veteran, hey Dreesen, how's your Cubs, hey Tommy, you're laughing at everybody,
right. That first time though.
That first time, they all turn their backs on you, they go, it's his first time, they whisper, Now you get behind a curtain and Doc Severson's band is playing because they're in commercial break.
Right.
Coordinator said, you all right? Yeah. And you said, yeah, I'm fine. I said, okay. Now, there's 15 million people watch that show. Not only that, all the agents and coordinators, and your mother's got everybody back in the old neighborhood. If you bomb, you can't even go back home. And so you're behind that curtain, and he leaves you alone. And now you're all alone, you're pacing. There's one black guy there. I think his name was Levi, or Eli. He worked with him for years. His job was just to open the curtain when it's time for you to go out. And you're walking back and forth. Now the music stops, and your heart stops. You go, oh boy, and you hear Johnny talking. We're back now, and I'm glad you're in such a good mood tonight because my next guest is making his first appearance on The Tonight Show. That key line, I'm glad you're in such a good mood tonight. He's setting them up for you.
Yeah.
Thank God for him. He won't ever do it. He would only do it the first time. He doesn't do it the second and third time. So, and they open up that curtain, and you walk out. Oh, my, so welcome, Tom Dreesen, and you walk out, and the bright lights, you can't even see the audience. They're in shadows. And there's a mark on the floor, a green tape on the floor. That's your mark. I hit that mark, and oh boy, and I got that first joke out, and it got a laugh, and I get the second joke out, and it's got a laugh. Whoa, boy, and I get the third joke. Now I'm on a roll. It's got a laugh, and the 4th joke, I hear Johnny laughing real loud, and Ed McMahon.
Wow.
Oh, it's like laughter from heaven. Now you're on a roll. I got an applause and an applause. I end up getting 11 applause, and now I was done. I did my bit, and I said, you've been a wonderful audience. This is my first appearance on The Tonight Show, and show business is a tough life. I said, so if you like me, just if you like me, and you're Protestant, say a prayer. If you're Catholic, light a candle. If you're Jewish, somebody in your family owns a nightclub. Tell them about me, will you? And I walked out. I go through the curtain, and they come running up. Craig Tennis running on the court. He said, go back. He said, go back. Johnny wants you back. I said, go back and sit by Johnny. He said, no, don't sit by Johnny. Just walk back. And I walk out, and now the people are still cheering, and Johnny gives you that little circle with his finger.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't even tell you, Ari, I can't tell you what years of sleeping in a car and struggling and hitchhiking up down Sunset Boulevard, not being able to put groceries on the table, food on the table for my family, rent way behind due, not having a car, a grown man with 3 kids and couldn't even have a car for a while in my life, catching buses and trains, and now the whole world changed. I mean, the next day, all hell broke loose in my life, This guy, Lee Curlin from CBS, saw me. I told you, signed me to a development deal. But Merv Griffin, Dinah Shore, Mike Douglas, Hollywood Squares, Midnight Special, Rock Concert, Soul Train. I'm the only white comedian ever to do Soul Train.
Yeah, wow.
American Bandstand.
Midnight Special, all those.
Yeah, Midnight Special, $20,000 Pyramid. Match Game, all these shows.
Right.
My whole life changed. Sammy Davis Jr. takes me on the road for 3 years in Las Vegas. I'd never worked Vegas. I mean, that one appearance changed my life.
That's incredible.
I've never stopped working since. I mean, I went on to do, as you said, 61 appearances.
61, yeah.
I did 50 on Letterman at least, and Letterman let me host when he had the shingles, So every time I see Dave, I'd say, you don't look so good. You need to take some time off.
No, that's amazing. And, 61 times 50 with Johnny and 11 with Jay Leno.
Yeah.
The thing that blows me away is you have to have a new 5 minutes every time you go on. You're doing it 60 times. That's like 6 hours of material. Are you going on like at least 2 times, 3 times a year?
I did one time I did 8.
Oh, my God.
8 times in 1 year.
How do you prepare for that?
Well, I mean, my ex-wife would tell you that all of a sudden everything became material. The second I walked through that curtain, when the show was over, my mind was already on the next Tonight Show. Everything became material. I had a paper and a pencil in my pocket all the time, a notepad, on airplanes. And you'd say something, and I'd say, oh, that's funny, Ari. And I'd think about it and say, now, you know how to make that really funny? I'd observe something and put it into material. Everything becomes material, when I went through a divorce, that became a great 10 minutes, any tragedy.
You got to look at it with that,
Well, show them your pain. The
side.
Audience wants to see your pain.
Right.
Show them your pain. Laugh at your pain, Poke fun at yourself. And, so they know you're one of them. But, yeah, it was very difficult to keep coming up with new material, but that's what you had to do if you were going to keep doing The Tonight Show.
Would you just know the next date and just say, all right, I got 30 days or a month and a half?
Well, you know what,
I
started, at one time I had carte blanche on that show. I mean, I could actually call the coordinator and say, I'm going to come on March 18th. He said, you got it, Tom. Once they knew that I would always deliver. Now, I'll tell you what I should do. To me, necessity is the mother of invention. I wouldn't have the first joke, and I'd call them and say, I'll be ready in 3 weeks. They'd say, okay, and then I'd get crazed. I'd go to the Comedy Store, the Improvisation. I'd go to every comedy club. I'd go out to Hermosa Beach, the Comedy Magic Club.
I was a doorman there.
Were you really?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike
I
Lacey.
think I saw your name on the wall there. Yeah, Mr. Lacey. Yeah.
Nice fella.
He's my hero, yeah.
And one of the nicest guys in the business. And I'd go to the Ice House. Now I'm obsessed. I got 3 weeks and I got to come up with this new 5 minutes, And invariably, the night before, I'd have it tight and say I was doing it March 18th.
Yeah.
March 17th, I'd go in the Improvisation. It might be a Tuesday night or something. I'd walk up and bomb with that 5 minutes.
Oh.
It wouldn't work for some reason. Now it's always the night. It became almost great. It didn't work here,
If it doesn't work the night before, it's going to kill on the
It
Tonight
began
Show.
to be like an omen for me,
Yeah.
But I would have a tight bit, and it just was. And that's what you had to do in those days to survive.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's very inspiring. And then you said Sammy Davis got you and you went to Las Vegas. That was the first time you performed in Las Vegas?
Yeah, and Sammy took me there. I did his TV show, Sammy and Company. He had a talk show, that he filmed out of Lake Tahoe.
He was so talented.
Oh,
my God.
The most enormous. There's never been anybody like him.
Yeah.
No. He really is, and maligned. It breaks my heart whenever I see black comedians making fun of Sammy Davis or mimicking him, making fun. He was the Jackie Robinson of show business. He knocked down doors and barriers so that they one day could perform in those places. Sammy was really just the best.
Absolutely.
I mean,
in every industry, too. Dancing, singing, telling jokes, everything.
There's nothing he couldn't do.
Oh,
nothing.
yeah.
But anyhow, so yeah, Sammy took me on the road, and I was working in Chicago with him one time at the Marin Theater. He said, have you ever worked in Las Vegas? And I said, no. He was in my dressing room, and I said, no, I always wanted to. He said, well, you open there January 17th for me. And I went to Caesar's Palace, and just to drive down that strip. And in those days, you go down the strip, and every hotel had a singer, comic singer.
Yeah.
Every hotel. And to see your name on the marquee with Sammy Davis Jr., oh boy, that was it was so moving, you know, and so exciting.
That's incredible, yeah. And I always admire comedians that perform in Las Vegas, because you go down in the Improv any night, and everybody's around the same age, the demographics, everybody's from around the neighborhood and stuff like that. But you go to Vegas, there's a guy from San Francisco, Alabama, Japan, England. How do you make all those different people laugh?
Yeah, by the way, that's a real good point, Ari. I don't know how many times people say, you know, he's a Vegas comic, as if that was a low term.
It's a negative connotation?
Like it was a negative connotation. He's a Vegas comic.
I feel like that's the highest thing you could do.
And when I work Kansas City, or if I work, Dover, Delaware, I will research that neighborhood and research that community, and I'll come up with material just for that community. You know what I mean? I'll figure out in my act what we, but when you go to Vegas, like you say, they're from South America, they're from Japan, they're from Brooklyn, they're from Sacramento, and you better have some pretty, general material that's going to work on them. And
this might be a silly question, but have you discovered any topics that are pretty much universal that everybody can relate to?
Well, first of all, just on anything to do with everybody's had a mom and a dad and a daughter and a son, and everybody's had to pay taxes.
Yeah.
And in Vegas, everybody usually flew in there. As opposed to Atlantic City, everybody drove there.
Right.
When I worked at Atlantic City. So if you were going to do airline jokes, they'd work better in Vegas than they would work, you don't do a whole act on them, but a few of them. So, but usually, the other thing is when you're writing comedy, there's two rules when you're writing a joke, two very simple rules. Number one, comedy is 9/10 surprise. The audience laughs because they didn't think you were going to say that or do that. So the setup line has to hide the punchline. And the other rule is there are no victimless jokes. Who's the victim in this joke? The government, the airlines, the society, yourself. Your daughter's boyfriend.
Right. Somebody's always wrong.
Somebody's wrong in this joke. Somebody's got to be wrong, and it could be you,
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And what was that first experience, the first few experiences like performing in Vegas? Was
First
it
of
difficult?
all, it was very difficult in Vegas, and I'll tell you why, in those days, but Sammy Davis Jr. saved my soul. Caesar's Palace served food in those days, so the comic was thrown to the lions. Caesar's Palace is not a great comedy room. It's got a high ceiling. I love the Desert Inn. I love the Sands. I love the Riviera Hotel. I love the even the MGM Grand had a high ceiling in those days, in the Valley Grand. But so you like more intimate type rooms,
Right.
But Caesar's was a tough room, and they served dinner. So the comic was thrown out there. They were hauling food back and forth, waiters and waitresses eating. And they had to have that food out of there before the headliner came on. So there was a mad dash bringing out checks and bringing chairs. And you hear clangety, bangety, bangety. But Sammy knew that. And he told me, he said, at rehearsal, the first day at Caesar's, he said, in front of the conductor there or the entertainment director was a guy named Nat Brandywine. And he was standing there with us. Sammy said, Tommy, he said, or Nat Brandywine said to me, he said, Tom, you'll do 20 minutes. Sammy does an hour and 10. We do 90-minute shows here because we want those people back in the casino. And Sammy said, no, Nat. He said, I'm gonna come out first. I'll sing 3 songs. He said, and Tommy, you do 20, 25, whatever you feel comfortable, and I'll come up and I'll make up the time. And Nat says, well, it's your show, Sammy, whatever you want. He said, Nat, it's Tommy's first time here. He's got a score. He said, Tommy, if you score your first time and the critics like you, they'll bring you back. They'll bring you back for years to come. So you want to score that first time here. And Sammy knew. So Sammy would walk out while people are eating, and he'd start to sing, and oh, my God, the waiters were taking food away from people who haven't even started eating yet. And by the time he finished his third song, that room was set up so great. I mean, they were just sitting on the edge of their seats. And he would say to them every night, he'd say, ladies and gentlemen, you've stuck with me through the good times and the bad. He said, and I think of my audience sometimes as friends. And he said, and when you've got good friends and you want to do something for them, like maybe get them a gift. He said, I got a gift for you. I saw this kid. I think you're going to like him.
Wow.
I mean, that setup, yeah. It almost was too much, Ari. I mean, there was times I was in the wings going, well, don't, like they say, don't overdo it. But I would walk out there and I'd say to the audience, all my life I dreamed that one day I'd work Las Vegas. All my comedy life, and I dreamed it would be Caesar's Palace, but I never dreamed that Sammy Davis Jr. would be my opening act. And he'd laugh. He'd get a big
Yeah.
kick out of it,
What a classy guy. That's
Oh, he was the best. He was the
amazing.
best.
And then, so from there, I heard you say, I think you were opening for Smokey one time in Vegas, and then Frank, did he come to see you, or did you perform for him?
No, after I toured with Sammy for 3 years, and I toured with Tony Orlando and Don. I toured with my buddy Frankie Avalon. I toured with different artists all the time, Gladys Knight and the Pips. But I toured with Mac Davis and who else? Just different people. But I toured with Smokey Robinson, who we were dear friends, and I just love him to death. Real quick side note. Every year I would go back to Chicago at one time and I'd run 26 miles for multiple sclerosis. My sister Darlene had MS, so I called it 26 miles for Darlene. And I would honor her that day, and I'd run 26 miles, and people would pledge money for every mile I ran. And the proceeds would go to research for MS. Well, I would bring in all my celebrity friends to run part of the way with me, a block or 2 blocks or a mile, whatever you could run. Smokey's the only one who ran all 26 miles with me. And I once said to him at an award show, I said, my mom always told me that a true friend is somebody, if you ask them to go a mile, they go 2 miles. I said, what kind of friend do you have when you ask them to go a mile and they go 26 miles? This is my friend. So I toured with Smokey, and we were working at Caesars in Lake Tahoe. And Frank Sinatra was working next door at Harrah's. And I had worked Harrah's many times with Sammy. And I was a big Sinatra fan. He was on the jukeboxes when I was a kid shining shoes, So after my show one night, I didn't even change out of my stage clothes. I ran over to Harrah's Hotel, and I was running into the showroom when the vice president of Harrah's Hotel, a man named Holmes Hendrickson, saw me. And he was with a guy named Mickey Rudin, who was Frank Sinatra's lawyer, a very powerful guy. So I was running into the showroom because I didn't want to miss Frank's opening. And he saw me. He said, Tommy, come here, Tommy. And I went over there reluctantly. And he said, Tommy, this is Mickey Rudin. Well, I recognized the name, I said, oh, hi, Mr. Rudin. He said, Mickey, this is Tom Dreesen. I think Tom would make a great opening act for Frank Sinatra. And the lawyer got a pained expression on his face like he had heard that before. And he winked at the vice president, but I caught the wink. He said, hey, kid, if I gave you a week with Frank, would you want more than $50,000? I said, Mr. Rudin, put it this way. If you gave me a week with Frank, would you want more than $50,000? He said, I like this kid. And then next thing you know, a week later, I get a call. Would you like to work with Frank Sinatra 1 week in Atlantic City at the Golden Nugget?
Oh, my God.
I said, yeah. And I figured I'll get my picture taken with it and hang it in every bar back in Chicago. And
that'll be it.
That'll be it. You can close the lid on me, And I worked with him. And the second night, he and his wife, Barbara, took me out to dinner. And in the middle of dinner, I can remember like it was yesterday, he set his knife and his fork down. He said, I like your material and I like your style. I'd like you to do a few other dates with me if you're interested. And I didn't say, let me check my calendar. I said, yeah. And it turned into 14 years, 45 to 50 cities a year. And I'll tell you this, Ari, in the 14 years, I turned down more sitcoms than most comedians get offered in a lifetime. Because every time the networks came to me and wanted me to work with some ensemble group, it would mean I would have to quit flying in Frank's private jet all over the world, staying at his home, hanging out with Frank till dawn. And I just, where I grew up at, I don't have a degree from academia. I got a doctorate from the streets. I grew up on the streets. If you played a word association game with me when I was growing up, if you said tall, short, black, white, you said show business, I said Frank Sinatra.
Absolutely.
Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr. To me, they were the epitome of live entertainment. I never cared if ABC, NBC, CBS, I shouldn't say I never cared. Of course you care, but if ABC, CBS, NBC turned me down, it didn't mean anything to me that Frank Sinatra accepted me. Frank Sinatra said, come fly with me, come grace the same stage with me. Sammy Davis Jr. said, you can be on the same stage with me. Dean Martin said, come on my show.
Oh.
You can close the lid on me. I did what I wanted to do in show business. And as Frank says, the best is yet to come. I'm still not done with all I'm doing, but I wouldn't have turned those years down for nothing,
No, it's absolutely remarkable and incredible. So you're on the Dean Martin roast too?
Yeah, I did those, yeah.
Man, that's, I think, when I think show business too, I really think those guys. I was like, man, that was a different time. Those guys could do anything. They were so great and talented.
Well, he was too. Dean was a special guy, and I played golf with him. I play golf with his son now. His son's name is Craig, and I'm friends with his family. In fact, I'm going to his daughter's birthday party coming up here in next month. His daughter, Gail.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, they're great. I mean, Dean was a special guy too. He was
funny.
One of the funniest guys in show business. A lot of people think of Dean as a singer. He was a singer, but he was a great comedian.
Yeah,
and he really was. He knew how to deliver a punchline.
His timing was impeccable.
He wouldn't say anything all day long, but he'd say one line and everybody would fall on the floor.
I mean, this might be a silly question since you're friends with him for so long, but do you have any memories that just stand right there in front of your head that just always pop up of you and Mr. Sinatra? Or?
Oh, I do a one-man show now called An Evening of Laughter and Memories of Sinatra. So it's a 90-minute show. I do it in theaters, the theater goes dark. On the screen, Dennis Farina narrates my life. It's a video of my life, a film of my life. Then I come out and I do stand-up comedy for about half an hour. Then I segue to a bar that's got a bottle of Jack Daniels on it, which was Frank's drink of choice, And I start telling story. I tell a joke at the bar and the lights go out, and Frank comes on the screen singing. It's 2:45. There's no one in the place except you and me. And I let that mood set in. When they get to the chorus, make it one for my baby, one more for the road. The light hits me, and now the audience is in a bar with me, and I've come home. And I tell him the first time I heard that voice, I was shining shoes in a bar on the south side of Chicago, and he was on the jukebox. And then I take the audience from that little boy hearing Frank Sinatra on the jukebox, shining shoes on the south side of Chicago, to one day carrying his coffin out of a church in Beverly Hills. Oh, so I take them on that journey, and with a lot of laughs, but then tears. I have them in tears when I take them to the funeral, and then I close with a monologue and have them laughing again. And then I toast them all, and I say, I wish for all of you what Frank Sinatra wished for you, the very last song that he ever sang on stage, is that the best is yet to come. And as they're leaving the theater, Frank singing, the best is yet to come. But see, all right, I always thought that a good comedian could make you laugh for an hour and a half, but a great comedian can make you laugh and cry in an hour and a half. And I only saw two comedians do that, Richard Pryor and Red Skelton. And I said, I want to do that one day. I want to try that. That's very dangerous. When we get them laughing, we don't want to stop. Right. You get them on a roll. Yeah. You want to leave them laughing, right? But I just want to challenge myself. And this one-man show is loaded with stories about Sinatra. Funny stories and poignant stories,
That's amazing. I got to come see that show. That sounds really incredible.
Yeah.
And I heard you mention that Mr. Sinatra was not only a great friend of yours, but he was also kind of like a father figure to you. Did he give you any advice or anything?
All the time. Yeah. Toward the when I first met him, we were like friends and buddies, and he was my employer, and then after a while we became like pals. We hung out. But toward the end, when he was getting older and he was getting closer to the end, and he would start giving me advice when I was going through a divorce. He advised me. He said, I can't give you advice on marriage. He said, but I can give you advice on divorce. He was divorced 3 times.
Yeah.
He said, stay friends with her. Not for you, not for her, but for the kids. He said, it's very, very important. And he did that. I wasn't able to do that. And I regret that to this day. And that was the advice he gave me, though. And he stayed friends with his ex and stayed real close to the kids, of course. I'm real close to my kids, but I should have stayed closer to my ex. He was right. But he taught me other things. I remember one time we were coming out of the Waldorf Astoria. We were going to do a gig, and we were rushing, and we went out the back door because he had a big apartment upstairs. And if you go out the front, he'd have got mobbed. So we're going out the back, and he's rushing to the limo, and the security guys were with him, and a woman jumped out of the doorway, and she'd been hiding there, the doorman told me, for like 5 hours.
Oh, my God.
And she said, Mr. Sinatra, please, Mr. Sinatra, please, please. And the security tried to stop her, and Frank turned around and he said, it's okay. He said, what is it? She says, Mr. Sinatra, my wife, my husband is home sick. He said, and very ill. And if you could sign an autograph, it would mean the world to him. And Frank said, sure. And he's signing the autograph, and she said, oh, what beautiful cufflinks. And they were $2,000 cufflinks. I know where you got them at. He said, thank you. And he finished the autograph, and he took the cufflinks off, and he gave them to her and said, give these to your husband. She said, no, I don't want them.
Yeah.
I don't want them. I just was admiring them. He said, no, give them to your husband. I'd like him to have them. We get in the limo, and I said, Frank, that was beautiful. That was wonderful. But why did you do that? He said, Tommy, if you possess something that you can't give away, you don't possess it. It possesses you.
Wow.
And it was a lesson that I never, those are the kind of things he taught me. It's interesting because he said, nothing you have is yours. The second you die, it all belongs to somebody else. He said, Aristotle Onassis, when he died, the second he died, all that money transferred. That wasn't his yacht. That wasn't his mansion. He was only using it. We're only using it, Tommy. It isn't ours to keep, So share. And he was the most generous guy I ever met in my life. On a funnier, smaller scale, 2 weeks after that happened, I'm having, right here where you're interviewing me, I'm having Monday Night Football. The Chicago Bears are playing the Minnesota Vikings. and all my Italian buddies, Eddie Marinaro and Frankie Avalon and James Nairn and Joe
wow.
Pesci
Yeah.
and Joe Pesci and Frankie Valli, and they all came over here, and Frankie Avalon's making Philadelphia steak sandwiches, and Dennis Farina's making the pasta, and we're going to watch, because Eddie Marinaro played for the Vikings, and of course I'm a Bear fan. So we're going to watch all this and have a good lot of laughs. And I said, this is like 2 weeks after the incident with Frank. I rush over to the liquor store around the corner from here to get beer and pop and all that stuff. And while I'm in there, I had on an NBC golf hat with an NBC golf shirt from playing in Lake Tahoe in a tournament I play in. And as I rush in, the guy behind the counter from some different country, he said, "Hey, boss, like your hat. Nice hat, boss. Can I have your hat, boss?" I said, No. I said, "It matches my shirt." And I pay for the stuff, and I go outside, and I went, what am I doing? I went back inside. He had other customers. I set the hat on the counter, and I was leaving. He went, "Hey, boss, I'm only joking. I don't want your hat, boss." I said, No, please keep it. Please keep it. The thought that I hadn't grown enough as a human being that a hat possessed me, that I couldn't, that, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Because he had said to me, it's okay if somebody says, "I love your Mercedes-Benz," and you don't give it to them.
Right.
He said, but when you're in the bathroom shaving, you got to admit to that guy in the mirror that car owns you, because you can't give it away. And the thought that I thought that a hat owned me. So, I mean, those are lessons.
No, he gave you life lessons, not just,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was very,
show
very,
business.
he was the most benevolent man I ever met in my life, human being I ever met in my life. He did more for charity than you'll ever know, and no one will know, because he didn't want people to know. Some things they had to know, but when they didn't have to know, he could pick up a paper. If he read in the paper, a little girl from Albuquerque, New Mexico, has a brain tumor, and her family lives in a boxcar. The next day, somebody was delivering a check saying that all of her bills are paid, and the guy delivering the check didn't know where it came from.
My gosh.
That's just the way he did things.
And you've done so much for charity, and I really admire you for all that, and I think that's such a wonderful thing. You've had like hundreds of charities over the past 45 years of your career.
You know what? I had 8 brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
Every
I really learn a lot from people like you and Mr. Sinatra. I mean, you don't see that often anymore in show business, I don't think, and
it's not as intimate. It used to be, that you would get to know the entertainers, and because you spent years watching their growth. Today, someone does America's Got Talent, and the next day they're filling arenas,
right,
for a couple of weeks maybe, or a couple of years, But I had 8 brothers and sisters, and as I told you, we lived in a shack. Every Thanksgiving and every Christmas, the local civic groups would bring baskets of fruit, ham, turkey, things that my family my brothers and sisters had never seen, fresh fruits and all that stuff. The local group, the Kiwanis, the Rotary, the Moose, the Elks, the Lions, JCs. Mm-hmm. And every Thanksgiving and every Christmas, my mother would turn them away. She'd say, "No, my husband has a job. We don't deserve this." And 2 things stuck with me my whole life and my core values. My mother was right. He had a job and he should have been taking care of us. And B, it wasn't the government bringing us food and stuff. It was people helping people. If you get out of Americans' ways, they're the most generous people in the world. They won't let a neighbor starve. It's only when you mandate it that it makes a problem. But that stuck with me. And so every time that I wasn't working and somebody said, "Can you come and do something?" Of course I can. If my few jokes are going to make you laugh and raise some money for your charity, I'm glad to do it,
That's fantastic. That's really great.
Well, you can't keep taking from the stream, Ari, but I promise you this. The more you put out, the more that comes back to you. You shouldn't do it for those reasons, but all that stuff about cast your bread and what you sow, you shall reap, that's not only biblical, that's life. That's a universal law. Yep. What you sow, you shall reap. The more you put out, the more comes back to you.
The Beatles said, and in the end, the love you give is equal to the love you take.
No question about it. Okay.
Just 2 more questions.
Take your time.
I'm so sorry. You've been in show business for 45 years. Do you think comedy has changed a lot over the years, or has it pretty much been the same at its core?
Well, what has really changed, of course, is the content, the material. I mean, oh my God. When I first started out, like I said, we all tried to get to the Tonight Show, so you'd watch it, the Tonight Show. Now remember, we're in show business. That's 2 words, show and business. Yeah. Now, taking care of the show is one thing, but there's a business side of it. I want to get on the Tonight Show. Well, how do I get on? I'd watch the Tonight Show, and I'd see what the comedians were doing. There's no way you could use the language they use today and get on TV. But then along came cable years later, and so you could just say whatever you want to say. And it would the rule was if you didn't like it, change the station. But when I first came into show business, that wasn't the rule.
That wasn't the case.
Yeah, and you had to learn to work clean. Now, I'm not a prude. Like I told you, I got a degree from a doctorate from the streets.
Yeah.
I know every dirty joke there ever was and everyone. And by the way, I enjoy them, and I enjoyed comics that work that way. I couldn't make a living doing that in my day. I had to learn to work clean. I wrote, as you said, 5-6 hours of clean material on The Tonight Show, so I developed a wealth of material that could be done in front of corporate America. See, if you're working in a club and your name's on a marquee, the people that come in are at the mercy of your material. But if corporate America hires you, they can dictate policy.
Right.
They say, I've worked for all Jewish audiences, all Catholic audiences, all Protestant audiences, where sometimes they said, please don't use any offensive material, any even suggestive material. Now, you don't have to do the gig, but the corporate gigs, as any comedian will tell you, are the best gigs.
Yeah.
Because the money's good, and you don't have to worry about who. When I'm working in a club, I'm out there. I'm saying, how many people tonight?
Right. Corporate gigs, they're all there.
But they're there. They're there. And by the way, when you walk off, they hand you a check. Most of the time, they send you 50% up front. That's the way to go.
Yeah.
It's really the way to go. Yeah.
That's so great. And last question: if you could give any advice to younger comedians today, what would it be?
Well, I mean, there's so much we could do a whole hour on that.
But next week we'll come back.
You know what? First of all, let me start with the brand new comedian, the comedian who's thinking about becoming a comedian. Number one, start where you are, wherever you're at. Toledo, Ohio, start there. Start make your point that you're going to be a stand-up. 2, work as often as you can. Get up everywhere you can. If the comedy clubs won't let you on open mic nights, go to your local church, your local whatever, and say, can I get up and do 2 minutes? Can I introduce an act? Whatever. Get up on stage as much as you can. Work as often as you can. 3, read the book The Magic of Believing by Claude Bristol. The Magic of Believing. If you don't believe in yourself, you can't expect audiences to believe in you. So that 4, realize no one is ever going to help you. A lot of people think, well, I'm going to be appearing and some guy's going to come in to see me. They're only going to help you when you're marketable.
Right.
They can't help you when you can't make money for them. So no one is ever going to help you. You got to do it. You're all on your own. The days of developing acts in the studio signing you are almost gone. You've got to get out and do on your own. And don't look for that one person to come save your soul. You got to create the need for the opportunity. And 5, don't ever quit. Bertrand Russell once said there are people in show business who become major stars simply because they didn't have sense enough to quit when they should have. That's my story. I slept in a car hitchhiking up and down Sunset Boulevard, and I wouldn't give up until I realized my dream. So that's what I'd give the kids just starting out. Those who are in the business that are already in it, look, we're driven by 2 energies in our body our whole lives, our ego and our Holy Spirit. Call it what you want, your center, your soul, call it whatever you want. But that's what the 2 energies are in our body. You weren't born ego, you were born pure spirit. You don't know if you're a boy or a girl, black or white, Jew or Gentile. You don't know what you were. Mm-hmm. You were just a spirit. You loved everything that loved you. You gravitated to anything that loved you, and you loved that, and they loved you back. So you were a spirit. About the time you're 4 or 5 years old, adults, well-intentioned adults, sometimes misinformed, had been programming your computer. We little boys do this, we little girls do that, we Catholics do this, we Protestants, whatever it is. Pretty soon you're starting to develop an image of yourself based upon their input, their information. Then the ego is formed. Now the battle in your life, the yin in your life, the rest of your life is your ego and your Holy Spirit. Your ego and your Holy Spirit. You young comedians, your ego demands that you walk down the street and get mobbed. Your ego can never get enough power, fame, fortune, money. It has an insatiable appetite, your ego. It won't rest until it destroys you, because it'll take you to some place that'll destroy you. Your spirit, conversely, is like a song they had in the 70s. All I need is the air that I breathe and to love you. That was the chorus for a group called the Hollies. All you need is the air that you breathe, and the work, and love your work or love your family. That's all you need. That's what your spirit needs. It doesn't need all the things the ego does. So your yin and your yang in your whole life, in your show business life, is those 2. If your spirit, if you say, I want to become a great comedian, Tom, or I want to become a great singer, because one day I want to have homes in Beverly Hills and I have all them new cars, and I want to show those sons of beasts back home that they were wrong about me, and I'm going to, that's your ego, and that'll destroy you. Yeah. You say, I got to make it, because, Ari and I started out together, and Ari's already doing something, and I'm funnier than him, that's your ego, and it'll destroy you. Your spirit, conversely, again, says, you know what, I love making people laugh. I love the sound of laughter. I love bringing people together and making them, they're better off for having had my service. You know, service to humanity is the best work of life. Time someone's better off for having your service, if you're a masseuse, a truck driver, it doesn't matter. If they're better off for having had your service, you know, that's the service to humanity is the best work of life. So for those who I'm saying, it's tough not to be ego-driven, because the ego is a large part of getting us out on that stage. But keep your ego in check and do it listen to your spirit, listen to who you really are. And that's what the advice I'd give to somebody who's been in the business for a while and intends on being in it the rest of their life, you know.
Thank you so much. That was the golden rule, I think. Thank you so much, Mr. Dreesen. I really appreciated talking to you today.
You can call me Tom.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you
my
very
my
much.
pleasure.